Historical context. The National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party, grew into a mass movement and ruled Germany from 1933 to 1945 under the leadership of Adolf Hitler. Founded in 1919, the group promoted German pride and anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish. Originally drafted in 1920, the Nazi Party platform reflects the main ideas of Nazism: the belief in race science and the superiority of the so-called Aryan race or German blood. For the Nazis, so-called German blood determined if someone was considered a citizen. The Nazis believed that citizenship should not only give a person certain rights, such as voting, running for office, or owning a newspaper. It also came with the guarantee of a job, food, and land on which to live. Those without German blood, such as Jewish people, were not citizens and therefore were not given these rights and benefits. So we're going to read an informational text about two people who came in to challenge this idea. Two Who Dared, by Facing History, and it is modified. Martha and Waitstill Sharp were an American couple who undertook dangerous relief and rescue work in Czechoslovakia and France in 1939 and 1940. The rise of Nazi Germany leading up to World War II had led to many refugees leaving Germany, Austria, and other occupied countries. Nazi policies had triggered a crisis. There were escalating efforts to deny rights, employments, and education to Jews in Germany, sending thousands of refugees to the Czech capital of Prague, as well as other cities outside Germany's grasp. And when you see a bolded word, that means we have a definition down here. So a refugee, a person who has been forced to leave their country in order to escape war, bad treatment, or natural disaster. So in this case, it's really the bad treatment that they're facing from the Nazis that they are escaping. Okay, so let's scroll back up. To right here. World powers had failed to find a solution, and most countries, including the United States, did not want to accept Jewish refugees from Europe. Meanwhile, refugees with no way to get out of Europe lacked housing, work, and adequate food, and many feared arrest by the Nazis. Despite an isolationist mood and official policies that often discouraged involvement, individual Americans felt a sense of responsibility toward European refugees and found a way to act on their behalf. So again, isolationist, if we go down and look at that definition, a person in support of remaining apart, aka not getting involved in the affairs or interests of other countries or other groups. So kind of just stay out of it, not my business. The Unitarian Church, a religion with roots in Christianity, had links to Czechoslovakia and wanted to offer assistance. Unitarian leadership sought volunteers to head an effort to aid refugees in Prague. 17 couples turned down the post, but the 18th choice, Minister Waitstill Sharp and his wife Martha from Wellesley, Massachusetts, accepted. One quiet Sunday evening in January of 1939, the Sharps received a phone call that would change their lives. American Unitarians, members of a faith with roots in Christianity, had been following the refugee crisis in Czechoslovakia, where there was a large Unitarian community. Church leader Everett Baker was now calling to ask the Sharps to travel to Prague and lead an emergency relief mission. So a mission, the official definition, an important task that people are given to do through their religious group, especially one that involves traveling to another country, that he described as the first intervention against evil undertaken by the denomination. That just means by the Unitarians, a group of the Christian church. This work included assessing the crisis. There were already around 250,000 refugees who had fled Germany for the Czech Republic, the Czech capital of Prague, providing food, shelter, and support, and ultimately helping hundreds of Czech citizens as well as refugees to get out of Europe. The refugees included not only Jews, but also communists. Those are people who believe that everyone should have a fair share of society's resources, cultural figures, and Czech political leaders who were opposed to Nazism. Baker had already approached 17 other couples, and all had refused his request. Waitstill immediately wanted to say yes. He had been preaching against the evils of Nazism for years and saw Baker's request as an opportunity to take real action. Martha wasn't so sure. They had 2 children, only 3 and 8 years old, and Martha was nervous to leave them behind. She later recalled, "I was torn between my love and duty to my children and to my husband." When a good friend offered to take care of their children, Martha agreed to go on the mission trip. The Sharps arrived in Prague in February of 1939 with thousands of dollars donated by American Unitarians in hand and the promise of more to come. Just a few weeks later, German troops marched into the city and took control of the entire country, creating new waves of fear among refugees who had already fled Nazi Germany once and thought they would be safe in Prague. In an atmosphere of danger and violence, the Sharps spent 7 months helping the refugees. Waite still wrote to his church back home in Massachusetts, "Our last sight as we sailed down the New York harbor is still very vivid in our minds. A great lighted statue," so he's talking about the Statue of Liberty, "a monument to an ideal, towering into the night. We live and work very much in its shadow." So he's talking about they're trying to uphold those beliefs. What began as an operation to distribute food to and provide medical care for refugees soon turned into a rescue mission. The Sharps helped refugees escape from Europe by arranging connections with employers and wealthy people abroad, by compiling the complicated files of documents necessary to leave Europe, and by carefully attending to the difficult but essential job of timing visas to coordinate with ship and train tickets. Right? So these are all ways to get people out of Europe, out of this situation. Several times, Martha accompanied groups of refugees as they fled Czechoslovakia, her American passport and government connections providing a measure of safety at dangerous border crossings. Meanwhile, Waite still began a complex money laundering scheme, so it's moving money around illegally to keep it hidden, to get around Nazi restrictions on bringing money into or out of the country. He made a system that allowed refugees to leave their Czech savings with him in Prague, where the money was used for relief efforts. He then deposited an equivalent amount of American aid money in free European cities to be available to the refugees if they succeeded in escaping. So he's kind of moving their money from the Czech Republic to free cities for when they escape. Waite still gave the poorest refugees the best rate of exchange. He later said, "I knew it was illegal, but I did it because I had no other choice. I was beyond the pale of civilization. I owed no honesty to anybody at all if I could save human lives." The Sharps were constantly followed by Nazi police and had to learn how to avoid wiretap telephones, use codes for important documents, and stay hidden from police patrols. Their offices were destroyed by Nazi police, and they faced arrest when the Nazis ordered all refugee aid and assistance to stop. Despite these increasing dangers, the Sharps remained in Prague until August of 1939, when they heard a rumor that they were to be arrested the very next day. Arrest would certainly mean being sent to a detention center within a brutal system that allowed foreigners, so they're foreigners because they're from America, no rights. It could also mean violence or even death. The Sharps decided to leave Prague, and World War II officially began while they were sailing back to New York. Martha later recalled that after returning home, "We were back in another world. Love, children's arms, plentiful food, and the only thing that concerned Americans that September seemed to be which team would win the World Series." Right? Because America was not yet in World War II. Martha and Waite still stayed in Massachusetts with their children for several months before accepting another mission from the newly formed Unitarian Service Committee. They spent most of 1940 working in war-torn France, where they helped intellectuals, Jews, and others who were at risk to leave the country and provided aid to still more refugees. For their work in Nazi-occupied Czechoslovakia and France, the Sharps have been recognized as righteous among the nations at Yad Vashem, the highest recognition awarded by the State of Israel to non-Jewish people who risked their lives to save Jews during World War II. They are 2 of only 5 Americans to be so honored. Okay, so now that we've read this, you're going to start watching these other videos to do the different parts of your essay.